So this is a short demo of making a simple piano score using Frescobaldi and Lilypond. I installed these on this Mac 2 Mini, M2 Mini, using Homebrew. So the commands are just Homebrew install Lilypond and Homebrew install Frescobaldi. Um, when you do that, however, the default location for Lilypond isn't correct inside of Frescobaldi. So I click on this little button here, which is to run Lilypond on the text that's in here. We get a pop-up saying it couldn't find it, so we have to go to Preferences, and we have to tell it where to find Lilypond. This is under the Lilypond settings. Um, we could either edit the standard one, which is actually probably not a bad idea. Uh, so it is a bad idea. What we want to do is we want to add a new one, and we want to add a custom one, because the standard one is trying to run an app, and in the old days on the x86 Macs you could get the app and this standard place would be right. But anyway, now what we need to do is we need to, instead of running the command lilypond, assuming that it's on our path, we need to find out where actually it is. So we go into the terminal and we type which lily pond. It tells us that it's here, so we can just copy this path with Command C and paste it, and we save that, and then we make that our standard. So the standard here moved. So that's where Lilypond. So if I click on this now, I don't get the error pop up. I can get rid of terminal. Um, anyway, so that you only have to do that once. Uh, so the idea is that here is your source text. Here is the output that Lilypond produces when it runs, and here is the generated score. Um, if you just run it with an empty file like this, you get this message down here that you really should have a version as the very first thing in your score file. And that's because that will tell Lilypond what features you are expecting to have. So if we copy that in, uh, and run it again, we'll see that message goes away. But you also get nothing because the only command we gave it is this version command, and it doesn't tell it to produce a score. So I'm going to give it another command that doesn't produce a score for information for when we do produce the score. Equals demo score, and composer equals Ulysses. And then we're going to need this to have a score command. Now, one thing that's very useful is that you want to separate out the bits of the score that are the notes and the bits of the score that are sort of the boilerplate framework. So I'm going to define a variable that has the notes, and this is not composer, this is composer. Um, I'm going to separate out the notes for the score into a variable. Now I'm going to make a piano score. So a piano score has two different lines of notes, namely the top and the bottom. Um, so I'm going to call these the upper and the lower. And the upper is going to have all of the directives and the notes that you need to fill in the upper, clef. And then we're going to have the similar thing for the bottom. So you can use notes in one of two ways. You can use absolute or relative. I'm going to say relative to C, uh, and the single quote here means an octave up, and so 2 octaves up from the default. What relative does is it picks the actual value to be the closest to the next one. This is assuming you have sort of connected melodic type ranges. You can explicitly say go down or up an octave or 2 octaves or whatever if it doesn't pick the right one, if you want to go farther away. Um, But in the absolute one, you'd have to do the same thing, but you'd have to specify the octave when you changed octaves. So this relative is usually the more convenient. And so on this particular, this is going to be the notes for the whole, from beginning to end of the upper part of the piano score. So we first want to say we have a treble clef, and we want to say we're in the key of C major, and we're going to give us our notes. So E, D, C, D, E, E, E. And then we're going to say we're at the end. All of this is inside of these this angle brackets, and that's going to give us the contents of the upper, which I'm going to copy, and then put on the bottom. I'm going to have another variable for the lower, and it's going to be relative to a C an octave lower. Single quote is up an octave, comma is down an octave, but it's going to have a bass clef. It's also going to be in C major, and it's also going to have the same notes. So now we're ready to actually define what we want Lilypad to produce. So we're going to do a score, and it's going to have inside of it a new piano staff. Now a piano staff is two separate staffs. Normally Lilypond would generate them serially, but so we have to tell them that these go in parallel. So you do that with these angle brackets, and then we of course need the closing brace. So the two things that we're doing in parallel are a new staff, and what it's going to have is the contents of the upper variable. So the backslash says use the value of upper in this location. And then we have the lower one that's also going in parallel, new staff lower. So now we ought to get something. Let's see, I've done something wrong. So here we have the for those notes. Now we see that the default note value is a 4, quarter note. Um, we'd like this to actually be a half note. So we can click on here, that takes us to the note. We can just say 2 at the end. Um, that makes that note a half note. The trouble is that it just remembers the last setting. So all of the notes here are now also half notes, which is not what we wanted. So good habit is to put the explicit note values at places where they change. So this time, having done that, we now, of course, we don't have to have it be in octaves like this. Um, we could also say that the lower is down even further by removing that. Uh, or we could move this down by removing one of these. Whoops. We can also, inside of here in parallel, do something like add lyrics. And the default is to have every word go to an individual note, which gets us a little bit in trouble here. This would be Mary had a little lamb, and we still have two notes. So to make this word go over two notes, you actually just say there's a basically a pause word here. So that makes Mary be covered by these two notes had a, and similarly, we need to do the same thing with little, so that little goes those two notes. Uh, we can also um, add another set of lyrics. Uh, for example, if you needed to have the note names for somebody who is starting to learn E, D, C, D, E, E, E. Of course, the more usual thing is if you had multiple verses. Um, you can, this is going to a PDF file. If you say, sorry, Lilypond, you can say, um, and this is going to a temporary file. This doesn't exist as a file. In fact, we haven't saved this, so this doesn't exist as a file. All it's doing is, you know, sending the contents of this through Lilypond to produce this. But if you there's a save menu item and there's a save all menu item, you can say I want to make a published version, you know, run Lilypond to publish it, and then you can say I also want to run it with my own settings, and this would, for example, let you pick an SVG output instead of a PDF output. Uh, you can also tell Frescobaldi that you want to have a PDF viewer and an SVG viewer tab down here. Um, so anyway, I hope that is helpful.